Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. Now, before we dive into the program, just an update on the clown show that happened just a little bit ago during the closing arguments for the state in the Rittenhouse trial. So, got to show you these images. Now, I have to let you know that this would be video, but they suspended, and they, being YouTube, suspended all the live streams of this. So we have photos here of prosecutor, this is Assistant DA Thomas Binger, holding the rifle, his finger on the trigger. He's flagging the entire courtroom, and he flagged the jury, trying to recreate Alec Baldwin style the scene from that night. But this is insane. I'm actually shocked, and you can see him there flagging everybody. I'm actually shocked that a bailiff or a state trooper or no one intervened at this point. Finger on the trigger, and he's not even shouldering this thing properly, and his arm's sticking out like a chicken wing. He's at the whole courtroom just flagging everybody in there. Now, like I said, they actually suspended all the various live streams of this. YouTube did. So we have these images. I mean, I think maybe they're really trying to control what's coming out here, because so far the best witness for defense has actually been Assistant DA Thomas Binger. Very interesting. So the prosecution has also been they spent all day trying to downplay the crimes of the convicted criminals that attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. For instance, Jason Rosenbaum. Now, remember Jason Rosenbaum, just a quick FYI. He's the guy, the convicted pedophile, like repeat child molester, convicted pedophile who was put into a mental institution. And the day he was released from the institution, he decides, literally the same day, decides to go to a riot where he swung a chain around, he set a dumpster on fire, he set another thing on fire, a flatbed truck, and was screaming the N-word so many times we can't even share that video with you. This is the prosecution trying to downplay his activity that evening. Watch.
He just happens to stumble into it. So what does he do that night? Oh, let me tell you all the awful things Joseph Rosenbaum did. He tipped over a porta potty that had no one in it. He swung a chain. He lit a metal garbage dumpster on fire. Oh, and there's this empty wooden flatbed trailer that they pulled out in the middle of the road, and they tipped it over to stop some bearcats, and they lit it on fire. Oh, and he said some bad words. He said the N-word.
Oh, Joseph Rosenbaum, not Jason, my correction. But what Thomas Binger just said there, the prosecution, the state, what he just said there, that somehow means that he also omitted the fact that Rosenbaum also was throwing bricks apparently at Rittenhouse and attacked Rittenhouse, was telling them that he was going to kill him, was also saying, I'm going to get you, and a bunch of other things we can't say. And according to the medical examiner, who was the one who autopsied Joseph Rosenbaum, and just said that according to the injuries and the residue that was found on his hand, that was indicative of him having his hand on the barrel, which, by the way, if you're unarmed and you grab someone else's firearm, it's actually that person's responsibility to maintain control of that weapon. But furthermore, that person who's grabbing it is no longer technically unarmed. So here you have Thomas Binger trying to rehabilitate a racist child molester who was attacking people and trying to start fights when he wasn't trying to burn down businesses. Oh, and Binger also said that the mob were heroes. Watch.
Situation is the crowd have perfect knowledge. When they're told that person running up the street just shot someone, we don't have time in the moment to go back and take a look at the body and replay the video and make a decision before going after the person with the gun. You know, we've had several police officers testify that in an active shooter situation, their first instinct, their first training is to go in and stop the threat. They don't sit there and wonder, well, maybe it was self-defense. I don't know. I'm going to, wait and see. And every day we read about heroes that stop active shooters. That's what was going on here. And that crowd was right. And that crowd was full of heroes.
We're going to have more on this tomorrow, but that's heroes, really calling the crowd heroes. If you want to have a discussion as to who is or who isn't an active shooter, I would think that Joshua Zeminski holding his pistol, brandishing it during a riot, and shooting it indiscriminately into the air because the bullets just disappear into the magical ether, that he would be actually considered the active shooter. And don't you just love how they diminish the tragedy of those who slip through the policies that they create, they go through these policies and are allowed to carry out mass casualty tragic incidents, but usually typically because of their regulation or fail to follow through. And then them trying to diminish the horror of that by conflating it and saying that self-defense is somehow the same thing. They realize that they have a losing case, and Thomas Binger's trying to just plant one little bit seed of doubt into the mind of the jury. Of course, maybe they don't really think highly enough of him to listen to him anymore, considering that he just flagged them all in court. So, in the meantime, we'll continue following that story. Apparently, the final arguments are today. He spent all afternoon in closing arguments, and the verdict is expected sometime this week. Now, as I said, in the meantime, it is official. Earlier today, Robert Francis O'Rourke has decided to return to politics and run for governor in Texas. If you don't recognize his name, that is because the Irishman styles himself as Beto O'Rourke. You can almost hear the cheers of adoring white progressive single women who have tons of cats and craft, or maybe it's silence. Since the mere mention of Robert Francis Beto's name is known to cause mass fainting spells, apparently, in leftists. Now, you might be puzzled by the reemergence of Beto O'Rourke. I mean, after all, typically when someone fails at something so miserably, like losing 2 straight political races, that person might determine that it's not meant to be, that no means no. Maybe drop the whole fake, Hispanic Beto shtick and go back to being Robert Francis O'Rourke, the super white and privileged progressive bruh that he always was and still is. Or maybe become a renowned artist like Hunter Biden. I'm sensing a pattern here. Maybe a poet that speaks for the marginalized that Beto's never actually met. Well, if you thought that Beto O'Rourke was going to tuck tail and disappear, his furry tail specifically, then clearly you don't know him. See, Beto learned early on in life that to grift your way to extraordinary wealth and privilege when you have absolutely zero personal achievements of which to speak of or talent, that it's not for the faint of heart. In a sense, Beto is an overachiever. I mean, rarely has someone so lackluster ever achieved such heights of fame. But let us recount the rise and fall, and now the attempted rise again of the Beto O'Rourke, that whole failure to launch phenomenon. Now, if you recall, Beto is a political prodigy. Really? That's what an abuse of that word. That originally rose to lofty heights on the back of fluff pieces like this one in Vanity Fair. Like Icarus, Beto was flying high in his run for the presidency. His quote on the cover of Vanity Fair read, quote, "I'm just born to be in it." Now, if there's one thing he lacks, it's humility. Everyone has their blind spots after all. And so off he went. Beto's bid for the most powerful position began on a wing and prayer. Actually, that's not hip enough. It actually started on a skateboard and a prayer. Watch. Yeah, he can barely do it. That's not very well. He was actually undeterred by the fact that Ted Cruz, an actual Latino, beat him. But then again, self-reflection isn't a part of Beto's game, and that's why he threw himself into the race for the whole enchilada. President of the United States, against all odds, I might add. I mean, all of the odds, every one of them. After all, Beto was everything that Democrats say they hate: white, male, and privileged, a man who appropriates Hispanic culture by changing his name to Beto to ingratiate himself to Latinos. And by the way, that's what his father, Pat O'Rourke, told the Dallas Morning News. This is a guy who was wealthy because he married into money, came from money, and married into money, like John Kerry, who married a billionaire heiress. And you don't mock that. You try pulling that off. But then, like Icarus, he flew too close to the sun and he melted under the intense spotlight of national politics. See, it turns out to be president, you have to, talk. And when Beto O'Rourke speaks, the fact that he's just this completely just empty-headed, vapid douchebra with nothing but progressive cliches to offer really caused people to just not want to listen. Here's some of his best moments. This is from one of Beto's failed campaigns. Watch.
We do not need any walls.
You've been very clear that you believe the president is a racist. Is the president a white supremacist?
He is.
Well, Jesus Christ, of course he's racist.
We have no more than 12 years to take incredibly bold action on this crisis.
We don't have more than 10 years to get this right. 10 years left to us, not as Democrats or Republicans or even as Americans, but as human civilization.
How do you think you did on the stage last night? What grade would you give yourself?
I'd give myself an A.
We have a white supremacist in the White House, and he poses a mortal threat to people of color all across this country. Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47.
Yeah, well, you didn't. He's like older than me, but yet he seems like he's like a total juvenile who still lives with his parents. By the way, Beto also spoke to America from the road as he campaigned for president, but not to visit the Tony enclaves and country club parts of America that he actually inhabits. No, Beto went out because he wanted to experience what America felt like when he wasn't deep in daddy's pockets. See, it was a chance for us to see Beto O'Rourke at his rawest, most authentic, most essential. So in fact, Essential Beto could be a great name for a B-side collection of greatest hits from his old band, The Sheeps, which was a horrible pop punk band that played basically power chords. That's awful. Can we just discuss how no man ever should either A, be in a onesie, or B, wear long johns with nothing over them? Anyway, Beto's excellent adventure to find himself out there in America. He even managed to hook up with his old buddy Willie to smoke some green and woo some ladies. Oh, and he left the kids with his wife too, so he could go and find himself. And because Beto isn't some packaged politician like, say, Kamala Harris, who guards her meticulous image, Beto keeps it real, like the kids do on Insta, letting us peek into his regular life. So he spoke to America from the road, right from the dental chair, which is so gross. Watch.
So I'm here at the dentist, and we're going to continue our series on the people of the border. I'm here with Diana. Diana's going to tell us a little bit about growing up in El Paso.
Hi, I'm Diana. I was actually born here in El Paso. My mom is from a small town in Mexico. So does my brain. My dad was...
Does anyone love himself more than Beto? No. The answer is no. No one does. Nobody. By the way, we kind of figured that you were at the dentist because, yeah. So the more he spoke, the more his poll numbers kept dropping, and not even the legacy press could save him. And then came the debates, and that other Democrat rising star, the mayor from Indiana, South Bend, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he stole Beto's thunder. By the way, where do these guys come from? Is there a factory somewhere that just clones these guys out, like the Play-Doh factory, where it's just white dude after boring ass old white dude wearing khakis and loafers? They're all the same. They're like the Bill Pullman, Bill Paxtons of Democrat politics. John Ossoff, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Gavin Newsom, except Gavin's got a lot of hair products, so he almost kind of steps out of that just from the sheer kind of, you know, lazy town-esque villain hairdo he has. Now, looking back, Beto O'Rourke never really had a chance against the mayor from Indiana. I mean, the mayor from Indiana, as I hear, was the rear admiral for the canoe fleet at Camp Wimpy Tonka. Now, after all, Beto's a privileged white dude in a party that hates privileged white dudes. So that's why he ran with his appropriated Hispanic nickname, Beto. Now, sure, it's about as authentic as Elizabeth Warren's claim to actually being an American Indian and member of a sovereign nation, but it's better than just being plain old white bread. So suddenly, under the clear lights of national debate, Beto was staring at his worst nightmare, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, another privileged white dude from the khaki and loafers factory. But he's gay, and that gave him an extra check mark that this guy didn't have, that Beto didn't have. And this put Mayor Pete way higher on that hollowed intersectional victim totem pole. Now, Pete Buttigieg, sensing that he could play the I'm gonna press gay man card, went for the kill on Beto. Watch.
The problem isn't the polls, the problem is the policy. And I don't need lessons from you on courage, political or personal. Everyone on this stage is determined to get something done.
Together, both of them could lift one 10-pound barbell. It was a kill shot right up there with Tulsi Gabbard's debate takedown of Kamala Harris when she reminded America that Harris incarcerated thousands of black men for smoking weed, even though Kamala Harris said when she was trying to ingratiate herself further with voters that she smoked it herself while listening to Snoop. No one believes you. Well, Beto never actually recovered from his bout with Mayor Pete Buttigieg, but like a phoenix rising from the ashes of his recently smoked cannabis pipe, Beto is back. And speaking of weed, that's part of his very important pitch for Texas, for governor. Why? Because he literally knows nothing else. That's, I mean, pretty much it. He knows that it's not the border that's being flooded by tens of thousands of people that you're worried about. You're worried about the lack of legal cannabis in Texas. Watch.
Those in positions of public trust have stopped listening to, serving, and paying attention to, and trusting the people of Texas. And so they're not focused on the things that we really want them to do, like making sure that we have a functioning electricity grid, or that we're creating the best jobs in America right here in Texas, or that we have world-class schools, or that we make progress on the things that most of us actually agree on, like expanding Medicaid or legalizing marijuana.
See, guys, because weed. Nothing's happening at the border. You want, like, legal weed, right? Oh, for the love. By the way, I love how he comes out and says, let's not be divisive, but hell yes, I want your guns. Racist. The stuff that every Texan would agree on is that, if that divisive, rabble-rousing Governor Greg Abbott would just leave town, right? Now, you might have also noticed that Beto O'Rourke dropped his skateboard for the moment because it was lame and he's not Tony Hawk. This is the new, more mature Beto. Look, he's standing out in a field. What K Street genius came up with this commercial? How do they do it? A political veteran fresh off the battlefield, scarred but wiser, humiliated yet more proud than ever, chided by Mayor Poot yet undeterred. Beto's pitch? Texas sucks, even though half of blue state America is running into its sane arms as fast as possible. Yes, Texas is doing it all wrong. He wants to be more like San Francisco. Who doesn't want to step over piles of homeless feces and needles when they go to the coffee shop in the morning to buy a $5,000 cup of coffee because of Bidenflation? Or New York, who doesn't want to get stabbed in a gang fight? I don't know, maybe all of us? See, Beto knows what Texas really needs. Apparently it needs more him. Gag. Oh wait, that's not something to be said. Gag. Really, actually it is. More California-style progressive politics. A little more Austin in your Dallas, if you will. The turd in the punch bowl just got a lot bigger. You know, more homelessness. Maybe a little defund the police, which he says he not only wants to defund the police, he wants to just totally deconstruct policing. Oh my gosh. Higher taxes, gun confiscation. You and what army? That's what will make Texas better, apparently. In fact, here's Beto again talking about defunding the police. Watch.
I really love that Black Lives Matters and other protesters have put this front and center to defund, these line items that have over-militarized our police, and instead invest that money in the human capital of your community. Make sure that you have the services, the help, the support, the healthcare necessary to be well and not require police intervention. And then also in some necessary cases, completely dismantling those police forces and rebuilding them. And I think the city council in Minneapolis made the right decision. You don't have one bad apple. You don't have four bad apples. You have a system-wide problem in that police department. And only by completely dismantling that system and rebuilding it intentionally with the community members at the table, do you have any hope of getting it right?
So, he couldn't go beyond four bad apples because he doesn't know anything about agriculture. He couldn't understand. He didn't know that you could actually go for a whole bushel if you wanted to be like a really, really dramatic. Has he been to Minneapolis? Asks probably everybody in Minneapolis. I'm just curious. So you're talking about taxpayers who are agreeing to give some of their dollars in property taxes. And by agreeing, I mean it's just taken without permission, because you never can really own your own property, and used for policing. And then you're going to take our money and actually use it for what? Things that we aren't actually agreeing to pay for? I mean, what in the world? Of course, I can't believe I've gotten this far without mentioning the fact that, again, you want to talk about policing. I can understand how he doesn't like police, considering that he disagreed with him when he almost killed someone drunk driving his Volvo and tried to flee the scene. And Texas police said, yeah, you did try to flee the scene. And when his campaign tried to lie about it and failed campaign after failed campaign, the Washington Post even fact-checked him and gave him 4 Pinocchios for lying about A, drunk driving, and then B, drunk driving and trying to flee the scene of said drunk driving activity after he ran his Volvo into a truck. Not everybody can be white privileged Beto and have a daddy for a county commissioner and a judge to make sure those charges go away, like that pesky burglary charge after the arrest in which he spent one night in jail. So what will it be, Texas? The divisive politics of Greg Abbott, who thinks that maybe, I don't know, the border should be secure and the government shouldn't shut you down and maybe stay out of your life, and, you know, let's protect our kids and also unborn and then those in school who also don't want to be divided with CRT? Or do you want to be led by a progressive furry who can only play like 3 power chords and who literally is the embodiment of privilege? I mean, if he could just get elected. You know, those Marxist ideas that cause every blue state to collapse in on itself. Well, Beto wants you on his team, and he wants you to know that he's not a one-hit wonder candidate. Although his band, I don't think, ever had a single hit and was horrible. Now, speaking of hits, like I said, hit and run candidate, hit and runs are something that he's left in the past. I really don't think I can underscore this enough. The DUI charge, but this is the new Robert Francis, supposedly improved, but still running with the nickname Beto because he thinks Texas Latinos and Hispanics are fooled and are going to vote for just him. In actuality, it's the same old Robert Francis. And unfortunately, in Robert's case, less is more. The less America knew about Robert O'Rourke, the better they liked him. But now they know a little too much. I mean, if you go back and look, there are actually articles that talk about how the Beto mania actually became like a Beto overdose, and it was too much. And then people had to do the Beto walk of shame, and they had a Beto hangover, and it was gross. And Robert Francis O'Rourke hasn't changed his pitch, and there's nothing new to learn about this guy. It is the same old menu of failed socialist ideas playing out in every blue state in America. It's the same failing platform of the current administration. But as they say in Texas, Robert is all hat and no cattle. Lots of gesticulating, but little genuine substance. So third time's a charm, or maybe the curse? So coming up, the push for more booster shots begins. Are you a COVID criminal spreading misinformation? We'll break it all down with Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment, next. Keep it here. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills that we can't pay for. It's time for you to take proactive steps to protect your wealth and your retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington keeps printing money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation. And as the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals, and they have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful information at legacypminvestments.com. Welcome back to No Apologies. Did you know that people who apparently spread misinformation about the COVID vaccine are criminals? At least that's according to the CEO of Pfizer. Watch.
People that want to make money, some of them, by playing with the emotions of these people, are creating a whole conspiracy theory, and they are trying to basically to benefit and profit from this fear of the people. And this is who are the criminals.
Yeah, not everybody questioning a vaccine is making a profit from asking questions about a vaccine. Although I do guess that means Dr. Fauci is a criminal, considering he told the entire world to take a vaccine that was 100% safe and effective, transfers immunity, and we've since learned that it can actually cause some issues, and it wears off. At least, I think the average is about 6 months? But don't worry, guys, because there are endless booster shots for the rest of your life, apparently. The thing about boosters, though, is we don't really know how many you're actually going to need. I think we're going up to 4. Check out this tweet from Bloomberg News saying that the term booster is a bit of a misnomer, and the correct number of shots for maximum efficacy isn't yet known. Now, of course, that's the case. Boosters forever. Joining me now to discuss, President of American Commitment, Phil Kerpen. He's a wealth of knowledge on this. Phil, always good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. First off, just a quick reaction from you to the CEO of Pfizer and how he's describing what I'm taking to be as just dissent and questions and people sharing their actual experiences, which to them isn't anecdotal at all.
Well, look, I mean, the most famous example of someone being banned for misinformation about his vaccine is probably when Alex Berenson was kicked off of Twitter for saying that immunity would wane after 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And now everyone agrees that that's exactly what happens. He was just sort of the first to read that into Israel's data before the rest of the world caught up to him. And they haven't unbanned him since. And I think it's pretty remarkable that the CEO of Pfizer, who said, 95% effective at preventing infections, when they were first rolling this out, is now chastising people for misinformation, when now that comes with an awful lot of provisos and it wears off and all the other. So look, I'm not saying it's a bad product. I think a lot of people have benefited from it, but this guy really needs to ease off on these claims about what is out of bounds to say about his product.
Yeah, it seems very hostile. And you can't be hostile especially when you're the CEO of Pfizer and people are taking the vaccines that you're making and they're being mandated to do so by their government, or at least in speech anyway, being mandated to do so. Which brings me to the booster question. I mean, you just mentioned Berenson, which is interesting because he's banned for saying now what is a headline, what everybody's talking about. Oh, well, now it looks like the immunity, the coverage from these vaccines are waning after a certain point. So, I mean, is this really going to be kind of a forever sort of, not even a booster, because it's not transferring immunity, but is that kind of what we're looking at, like this forever cycle?
Well, I think the big question is whether you're going to get a more durable response after the 3rd dose, or maybe even the 4th dose, where you'll have kind of a permanent or longer term immune response and you won't need to get it regularly, or whether this is going to wane just as quickly or even more quickly as the previous shots. And the big question then is, does this become something where people in the high risk population get it every year? Or they try to even push it on everyone every year, like the flu vaccine. And that's, I think, the ideal business model, probably for Pfizer, but whether that's something people actually want before there have been long-term longitudinal studies of what happens when you get many doses of this, that's going to be a big question mark, because, the trials were pretty short. The trials haven't been going on that much longer than the mass rollout of this thing, because they rushed it. So there are a lot of unknowns with this, no question about that. And Dana, to me, the biggest question mark in all of this is the oral antiviral pill that Pfizer claims is 90% effective. Is that as good as the Pfizer press release suggests? Because if it is, then the vaccines are kind of already obsolete. When you actually get sick, you can take a pill that works 90% of the time. They may have sort of they may have sort of eliminated the demand for their old product with their new one, if it really is as good as they claim. But I think a lot of people are going to be skeptical about that claim until we see it proven after the way the shot turned out.
And that's exactly where I was going with my next question on that pill. I mean, we don't have any long-term data on this. We don't have any comparisons as to how it performs next to the injection, and that's something that it's kind of, and would you still classify this as kind of an emergency situation where we have to forego the usual testing and waiting period, and so let's just, through emergency authorization kind of push this out? Or do you think we've gotten to a point where maybe before we unleash some of that stuff, we can do, maybe take at least 6 months or maybe a little more, and just kind of wait and see, what the studies show, and what, if we're researching this with control groups, what that turns out? I mean, are we at that point, or I have a headline coming up for you about cases increasing in Western Europe and elsewhere, but that could be seasonal.
Well, Dana, I'm kind of more libertarian about this stuff. I don't love tons of FDA red tape and restrictions and limitations anyway. I mean, my view is, make these things available to people if they want them, but don't have this over-the-top pressure campaign. Certainly don't have any mandates, and be very clear about what we know and what we don't know, so people can make their decisions. And I think that if you do that, it's fine. If somebody wants to go boost themselves constantly, I think that should be allowed, but let's be very clear about what we know and what we don't know, so people can make those decisions.
Boost themselves constantly. That's funny, because I keep thinking, gosh, that'd be a weird like a slogan for the administration and going and getting their booster shots.
Well, I will say this, Dana, one of the things that recently came out that was really interesting is the Regeneron shot, the monoclonal antibody shot, has now been proven to have at least 8 months of durable protection if it's used prophylactically. So it can be used not just as a treatment, but if someone in your household has COVID, you can get it as a post-exposure prophylaxis if you're on the qualifying condition list. And that now looks like it lasts up to 8 months, which may be longer than the vaccines even. So, there are a lot of tools here for people to choose. But if we convey the information that we know honestly and accurately and don't pressure people, I think people will make much better decisions.
Yeah, people are really good judges of their own risks, and they can make that assessment themselves. Last question for you, Phil. We're talking to Phil Kerpen. Really appreciate your time. Headlines as we go into the holidays. For the first time in the last 2 months, coronavirus cases are trending upward again in a majority of states as the season ramps up. This is from USA Today, and they're looking at data from Johns Hopkins University. And is this because people are getting out more? Is it? I know the last time that you were on with us, we were talking about how this is really endemic. And it's also, as you see, colder temperatures outside, people are going to be inside where, it's warmer. You might see increased cases in those areas. I mean, down here in Texas, and I would imagine in some of these southern states and Florida, as it cools off, people will probably be spending more time outside as opposed to inside. And then maybe they'll see those cases kind of taper off. What is your take with this? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's being attributed to any kind of new variant, but is it seasonal in that respect, or is there something else at work here?
Well, I think it's a combination of seasonal stimulus, both the behavioral effects that you talked about, people spending more time inside in the north, but also I think there are not yet identified seasonal factors that make all respiratory viruses in northern latitudes more prevalent in the winter. And this is something that's been identified for many decades with influenza. We're seeing it all over the world right now by latitude. And so I don't think it's entirely behavioral. I think there's another factor that maybe the amount of solar radiation lowers vitamin D levels. There's something that we haven't necessarily identified that I think is another seasonal factor with that. And then the other thing is population immunity. And so those southern states, because they've had that big wave in the summer on top of the previous winter wave and the previous summer wave, they're now around 65 to 75% of the total population has been infected, sort of ever infected with COVID. And that's getting to the point where you really can't get epidemic waves anymore. It becomes more of an endemic virus. Most of the northern states are well short of that. And so we would expect that as they get that seasonal stimulus again and the behavioral change, they're going to have one more big epidemic wave, most likely, maybe even more than one in some of these places that have low population immunity.
It's one thing we're going to have to keep an eye on, definitely keep watching it. But I agree with you. I just let the stuff out there and let people make their own decisions. Just arm them with the information. That's all they need. Phil Kerpen, always appreciate it. Really do. Thanks for being a voice of sanity in all of this. Good to see you.
Have a good one.
So coming up last week, we discussed this really creepy story. This is an Arizona school board president who kept a dossier with help of his dad on parents that he didn't like. It included social security numbers, photos of the kids, all kinds of information. And apparently his own father was even recording some of these parents and their children when they were at school. Up next, we have an Arizona mother who is demanding answers about that dossier. There's an investigation that's now underway too. Stick with us. You have homeowners insurance for a good reason, because without it, a fire, a flood, or a burglary could destroy you financially. But there's another major crime that your homeowner's policy doesn't cover, and it's called home title fraud. The FBI calls it one of the fastest growing crimes, and it can ruin you financially. And this is why you need to protect yourself with Home Title Lock. Title fraud happens when a criminal forges your signature on documents stating that you sold your home to them. They can take out loans against your home, they can leave you with the payments, and you'll spend a fortune in legal fees just trying to prove that you didn't commit fraud yourself. Home Title Lock puts a barrier around your home's title, and the instant they detect anybody, whether it's a cyber thief, even a renter or a relative trying to forge their way into your home's title, they help shut it down. Visit HometitleLock.com, register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim, and enter code RADIO for 30 days of free protection. That's code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. Welcome back to No Apologies. So last week we told you the story. This is insane. An Arizona school board president who kept a dossier on parents that he didn't like because they were critical of either mask mandates, vax mandates, or CRT. Now, since then, we've learned that the Scottsdale Unified School District, this is the school where this was happening, is hiring an independent forensics investigator to look into see whether or not school resources were used in the creation of this. Police are investigating as well. Joining me now is a parent in that school district, Amanda Wray. She's demanding answers and was apparently part of that dossier. Amanda, thank you so much for being here and for speaking out about this. So Tell me about this. There a dossier kept on parents, and it happened to get out accidentally because a parent, from my understanding, was accidentally sent this link to a Google Drive, and it was a public link, but not many people had it. I guess apparently this, the school board president here, and maybe a couple of other people. It gets out by accident. You're looking at it. Other parents are looking at it. And you will start seeing your names. And from what I understand, social security numbers, pictures and video of your children. Tell me what you found and what your reaction to this was.
Yeah, hi Dana. It was terrifying, honestly. The school board president, Jan Michael Greenberg, in an unsolicited email to several parents in our district, sent a screenshot of his desktop with that URL. And we honestly didn't look at it for a long time because we didn't think somebody would be so stupid as to provide a link to a digital dossier without password protecting it. So we eventually followed that link, and it was a treasure trove of horrifying and shocking information. There's body cam footage of Mark Greenberg, his father, stalking me and talking about concealing his identity and intimidating me, along with my financial records and background checks for 47 other different parents. And like you said, photos of my 8 and 10-year-old and my friend's 13-year-old girl.
Wow. And what did he feel the need to keep this? From what we understand from what's reported, these were parents who were just objecting, as parents have the right to do, to weigh in on mask mandates and vaccine mandates or CRT or any number of other issues. Parents have the right to do so. But yet, apparently, he took exception to this. This is why they kept this information on you all?
Yeah, it's not clear. He's still denying having any knowledge of it, even though he's the one who gave us the link. So it defies logic. But we had banded together last year and created a group of parents who wanted increased transparency with the district. We started going to board meetings and asking questions. And the more we looked into what was happening, we realized that what was happening in board meetings wasn't happening in the classrooms. And we started asking questions. There were all these subcommittees and secret committees, those responsible for approving $3.5 million of curriculum without having a single public meeting. So we wanted to know why we were being excluded, and we wanted a seat at the table. We were met with resistance, and this Jan Michael Greenberg took it to the next level and put a target on our back. And it doesn't stop there. We believe that the Vice President, Julie Sanowski, and Superintendent Scott Menzel are also implicated in this.
Wow. And all of these individuals they had this information, were able to how did they get this information? You said it had your Social Security, your financial details. How did they even get this information?
He went to a lot of effort. The troubling part of this was the amount of time that he must have spent researching us. I mean, the property records on my homes are public record, but he looked up the deeds and background checked us, and a lot of this stuff is public record, but he was curating it. And for what
doxed you.
Purpose? He doxed us, and for what reason? He was sharing this link with other people. We don't know who all had access prior to us having that information. But the most troubling thing that I found was we have a single mom in our group, and she spoke at a medical freedom rally. He looked up her nursing license and then filed a complaint and saved the complaint number as a screenshot in that. Trying to hurt a working mom who just wants to support her child and speak up against or speak in favor of medical freedom.
And she has a medical background, and he decided to do this. I can't imagine as a parent having my children in a school, and I know that this is something that you all, I can't imagine what you're feeling with this, knowing that you have a school board president who doesn't really seem at all whatsoever to have the best interest of your children at heart and is downright hostile. And his father was even involved, apparently, in obtaining some of this information. This whole thing is it's weird. And I know that Scottsdale Police, as I understand, they've launched a criminal investigation. They've hired a forensics investigator as well to determine whether or not they used any of the school property in this at all in order to get any of this information. Can you tell us, is he still in his position? And how in the world can the school really expect to have good relations with parents when this is the school board president and he's adamant that he was either justified or didn't do it, even though the evidence says otherwise?
Yeah, we're not buying it. It's a weak response from our school district. We have evidence that Scott Menzel, the superintendent, was involved, and there's a file in that dossier that is an email back in January where I told the superintendent that I was scared of Mark Greenberg and he had harassed me. And that unredacted email with my email address and phone number was printed from the legal department in SUSD and uploaded to that drive. So I have zero trust that the district is guarding our private information. You know, if the legal department has access to that, they probably have access to my child's health records or their emergency contacts and more. And furthermore, we don't let our children grade their own homework. This is the fox guarding the hen house. That independent investigation needs to be not reporting to anybody that had anything to do with the board, because we know their digital fingerprints are all over this.
That's a great point as well. Amanda Wray and all of the other parents in this school district, thank you so much for speaking out about this, because a lot of parents have been, well, they've been worried too for this exact reason, but I'm so glad that you all are persevering and defending your rights as parents and your children in school too. Thank you so much, and we'll continue following this, and we'll catch up with you when we have more developments. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that.
Of course, of course. Up next, folks, drama in the White House. Some palace intrigue. We'll break it down next. Black Rifle Coffee Company is not your typical coffee company. Black Rifle Coffee develops their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus they learned as military members. And they've spent thousands of hours tasting, sourcing, and perfecting coffee from across the world. Founded and operated by veterans, Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops who are away from home for the holidays. So Black Rifle Coffee is committed to supporting all who serve. With every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. In 2020 alone, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to soldiers, overseas law enforcement officers, wildland firefighters on the West Coast, and medical workers during the pandemic response. And this November, for every coffee purchase you make, a bag of their limited edition holiday roast will be sent to a service member overseas for delivery by Christmas morning. So help support the cause and visit blackriflecoffe.com/DanaTV and check out the freshest coffee in America. blackriflecoffe.com/DanaTV for 20% off coffee, apparel, gear, plus 20% off your first month of the coffee club. You can imagine it's tough to hold a coalition of people together who divide themselves along the lines of race and gender. And that's all the Democrat Party does. These ideas of diversity and equity and inclusion, they drive the party that they picked, and they picked the entire president's cabinet, not on merit or experience, but on those things, on how people look, these things that either people can control or not, like not character, not merit. So it was no surprise when they selected Kamala Harris for VP. She didn't really have the experience. She was kind of fast-tracked from being AG in California and then going to Senate. She only polled actually barely at 2% support when she was in last place, her own bid for the presidency. But she's a woman, she's a person of color, and that's what matters more than anything. So they paired her up with the establishment candidate, Joe Biden, whose time came and went, but they were gonna try for it anyway. And the bloom came off that rose pretty fast. And that's what happens when you have the lowest poll numbers at this point of any presidential term in the last 5 decades, followed up by even lower approval numbers for the VP, as in the worst ever recorded approval numbers for a vice president in the history of keeping track. No, I'm not exaggerating, that's the truth. True. And so the rumors of White House acrimony between the president's staff and the VP's folks, that's growing. More proof that this is true is this weird tweet from White House spokesperson Jen Psaki. Psaki said, quote, "For anyone who needs to hear it, VP is not only a vital partner to POTUS, but a bold leader who has taken on key important challenges facing the country, from voting rights to addressing root causes of migration to expanding broadband," end quote. So she hasn't done any of those things. The tweet feels really out of the blue. And she's a bold leader. The most that I've heard her speak in the past months is when she left discussions with Emmanuel Macron in Paris, and she stopped at a cookery place and got a bunch of pots and pans and was telling people about it. I'm not kidding you. That's the most I've heard. She's the border czar, hasn't been near the border except at an airplane hangar in El Paso where the wall is. Can't blame her, because who wants to be holding that particular stink bomb that Biden gave her? It's like he purposely gave her that to tank her. It certainly does doesn't intend on enforcing the border, that's for sure, but she's hardly been bold because she's been present, not at all. She was AWOL during the whole Afghanistan implosion. But if there was any doubt that this is some kind of problem in the White House, state media, CNN, they dropped this piece about the infighting in the administration. The headline, quote, exasperation and dysfunction inside Kamala Harris's frustrating start as vice president. Now, the article goes on to detail a lot of these simmering frustrations, like her team feeling that she's underutilized, and they're concerned that the unpopularity of Biden is hurting her. The Biden team feels that Harris hasn't put forward a plan on how she should be used more effectively. And interestingly, it's also pointed out in the piece that when Mayor Pete Buttigieg was criticized for taking maternity or paternity leave for chest feeding for 2 months, he was vehemently defended by the White House. But no vocal defense has been made on behalf of Harris. Are they trying to leapfrog over Harris to put out Buttigieg coming up in 2024? The article points out that the lack of defense by Harris, that's an example of white male privilege. So you are tempted to laugh at this point because she's only vice president because the Democrats liked that she was a chick of color. They didn't care that she literally had nothing of substance to offer. She was fast-tracked as AG. She didn't do her job well there. And now they don't care that she's off-putting. She's just not an amiable person. She's so off-putting that hardcore Democrats rejected her. They rejected her for the presidency. They didn't really even like her for VP. But Democrats pressed on. Now they're suffering the consequences. See, you can't hold together a coalition based solely on fake diversity. You have to have people with actual talent and charisma and ideas and the ability to articulate those ideas. And Harris is not charismatic and she has no ideas. She was essentially installed as the VP for all the wrong reasons that people should oppose. It should be on merit, not anything else. And that's becoming more clear by the day. I think any hope that she would succeed a very old and confused Biden is now by the wayside. The wheels are coming off. It's clear she's not going to succeed Biden, so they're turning on each other. Is the Biden team planting stories, attempting to use her as a scapegoat? Has the media turned their progressive darling? Have they turned on her, Kamala Harris? Or is Harris just finding that out? At the end of the day, she was an accessory all along, maybe only to add some youth and diversity to a fading, boring establishment candidate. Biden doesn't take responsibility for his failures, so this drama looks to be heating up in the coming days and weeks. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.